Now, nursing homes are quite different. Nursing homes mean that you require a level of care that cannot be done in an assisted living facility. You are sicker than what you can do in an assisted living facility. We have 24-hour nursing care. We have someone on the clock all the time going up and down hallways to help folks. Over my time in long-term care, I tell people all the time, if you have a picture in your brain of little ladies walking down the hall to play bingo, that is not a nursing home. We have moved way beyond that. Now, we actually take care of, in long-term care, in a nursing home, we take care of patients that I used to take care of in ICU. We have folks that are on tube feedings. We have folks that have intravenous therapy, IV therapy. We have dialysis patients. We have ventilator patients. We have folks that really require a high level of nursing services and of nursing care. And in this state, we have a program called Choices, where Medicaid determines if you want to apply for Medicaid, you have to get approved medically as well as financially. Because in Choices, they want to see if they can help you go other places and get the same type of care. And sometimes that is just physically impossible. So there's two levels of care in long-term care in a nursing home: skilled services and intermediate services. Skilled services, the patient comes, and now notice that I've changed. We're not talking about residents anymore. We're talking about patients. We're talking about really ill folks. The patient comes to us after a 3-day hospital stay. And if you have traditional Medicare, after a 3-day hospital stay, Medicare will pay for the first 100 days of long-term care services for you, for your rehab in a skilled facility. The first 20 days, they pay at 100%. After the first 20 days, you go into the copayment system. But they're still paying something on your bill as long as you are receiving those skilled services. Once you move past that skill service, you go to another level of care, a lesser level of care. But just think about this. How many of you know folks that have had fractured hips and they go to a nursing home for a month and then they go home? Do you all see more and more of those residents now? We didn't used to see those residents. Our facilities are experts in doing rehab for a population that is older. If you go to a rehab hospital, there is a certain level of, or a certain number of hours a day that you have to have the stamina to keep up with to stay in that rehab hospital. Most 80, 90-year-old folks cannot take 8 hours of therapy a day. They just physically cannot do it. However, they can come to a skilled facility with a great physical therapy program, occupational therapy program, speech therapy program, and suddenly in 30 to 60 days, we start to see people get better. We start making plans for them to go home. We send our team out to their home and say, hey, what do they need to live here successfully? What can we set up? What can we work with the families or the state agencies to set up in this house to help them get home? Which is a tremendous jump in thinking from where we were 10 years ago. So just because you went to a nursing home does not mean that the world's coming to an end and you're going to die there. Everybody erase that thought. Intermediate care, sometimes, and I say this sometimes because less and less people require this level of care. But you heard Jim this morning talk about that his grandmother was 107 years old. And she lived in a nursing home here in Johnson City, or close by in Johnson City. I don't guess I'm standing in Johnson City now. But she lived in a nursing home for several years at the end of her life. If you think about that, and you're 107 years old, how many of you are physically able, do you think, to keep a 107-year-old round the clock? It is probably one of the hardest tasks, and I do know that some of you in this room are caregivers, and I do know that you have elderly parents living in your house, or elderly aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. But it's probably one of the hardest jobs that God ever made for anybody, because it's like taking care of an infant, except every day that you know the infant is getting a little bit older and there's a little tiny light at the end of the tunnel that they're going to grow up and you don't have to wipe their rear ends every day, right? And that's not so true with elderly folks. When you lift a baby, you can do that physically pretty easy. It is harder to do with a grown adult. And there are no babysitter services to help you, give you some respite. Would you think that's true? And one of the most unkind things that I ever heard a church person tell someone in my congregation when I lived up here was that the person was really, really distraught at church, pouring her heart out. Now, I don't know how many of y'all go to church, but church is, this is where we can supposedly pour our hearts out, and our friends and our church family will take care of us. And they're pouring their heart out, and they said, we have to put her in the nursing home. And the church person that was standing beside her, looking at her, said, that is the awfulest thing I have ever heard you say. You promised her you would never do that. That's not kind. That is not an easy decision to make, is it? Any of y'all who've ever had to make it? I've had to make it for my family members. It's not an easy decision.